The feast hall is alive with noise. Torches flicker against wooden beams. Men are shouting, laughing, pounding their fists on long tables slick with spilled mead. You're sitting beside a man you barely know. His name is Bjorn. You met him 3 days ago when your father finalized the agreement. Tonight you became his wife. You're 16 years old. The year is somewhere around 920. You're in what will one day be called Norway, though right now it's just a collection of competing chieftains and scattered farmsteads clinging to fjord walls and forest clearings. The wedding ceremony followed every tradition. The sword exchange, the blessing at the temple. Your father gave you away with pride. Bjorn's family paid the bride price in silver, livestock, and land rights. Everything was proper. Everything was legal. But now the drinking has gone on for hours. The men are getting louder. Bjorn stands. He takes your hand. His grip is firm. He pulls you to your feet. The hall erupts in cheers. Crude jokes fly across the room. Older men shout encouragement. Your cheeks burn. He leads you toward the back of the hall, toward the small chamber that's been prepared. Your heart is hammering. You tell yourself what every girl is told. It will be brief. It will be over. You'll survive it. You reach the doorway. Bjorn pushes it open and you see them 4 men sitting on benches inside the room, drinking, grinning. They aren't leaving. This is the part most people don't know about Viking Age marriage. The wedding night wasn't private. It wasn't intimate. And it certainly wasn't about the couple. It was a public verification, a legal procedure, a ritual designed to prove legitimacy, establish authority, and bind families through witnessed consummation. This wasn't rare. This wasn't the action of particularly cruel individuals. This was standard practice across much of Viking Age Scandinavia, recorded in legal codes, saga literature, and surviving court documents. Let me show you exactly what the sources tell us. If you're interested in the darker truths of medieval history that textbooks leave out, consider subscribing. This channel is dedicated to uncovering the uncomfortable realities of the past with accuracy and respect. The practice had a name in Old Norse bjarhalop, the bride run, but the term covered far more than the wedding itself. It described the entire sequence of rituals that transformed a woman from her father's household into her husband's property. The feast came first. Wedding celebrations in Viking society could last days, sometimes a full week. Families displayed wealth through abundance. Meat, bread, ale, mead. The more guests, the more food, the more prestige. But the feast served a legal function. These weren't just friends and relatives. They were witnesses. Norse law required witnesses for major transactions, land sales, inheritance disputes, and marriages. A marriage without witnesses could be challenged. Children born from such unions could be declared illegitimate. Property rights could collapse. So the community gathered not just to celebrate, but to observe and verify. As the night wore on, the focus shifted. The groom's companions, usually men who served him or fought alongside him, began the ritual songs. The sources describe these clearly. The poetic Edda and various saga texts reference bawdy songs sung at weddings. The content was explicit, sexual, designed to embarrass the bride and encourage the groom. This wasn't good-natured teasing, it was psychological preparation. The bride was being reminded, publicly and repeatedly, what was about to happen to her. Her fear and humiliation were expected, required, even. According to the GRGs, the medieval Icelandic law code compiled from earlier oral traditions, a valid marriage required proof of consummation. The text doesn't explicitly command witnesses in the bedchamber, but it establishes that consummation must be verifiable if challenged. How would anyone verify? Through witnesses who were present. The practice is confirmed in saga literature. Laxdæla saga, composed in the 13th century but describing events from the 10th, mentions wedding night companions entering the chamber. Angel's saga references the custom indirectly when discussing marriage disputes. These aren't fantasy tales. Saga scholars widely agree that while sagas contain literary embellishments, their descriptions of legal customs and social practices reflect real Viking Age norms. So when Bjorn leads you into that room, and those 4 men remain seated, this isn't a deviation. This is the procedure. The men are there to witness, to confirm that the marriage is consummated, to verify that you, the bride, are entering this union intact, and to ensure that any children born from this union are legitimate. Your body is not your own. It belongs to your father until this moment. After tonight, it belongs to Bjorn. But tonight, it belongs to the law, to the community, to the witnesses who will testify if anyone ever questions the validity of this marriage. You can't refuse. You can't ask them to leave. To do so would be to question the legitimacy of the marriage itself. It would dishonor your father. It would insult Bjorn's family. It would mark you as uncooperative, possibly unchaste, so you comply, because compliance is survival, because refusal has consequences you can't afford. The legal codes make it explicit. The GRGs preserved in manuscripts from the 12th and 13th centuries, but reflecting earlier Viking Age law, dedicates entire sections to marriage validity. One passage states that a marriage can be dissolved if consummation doesn't occur or if the wife is found to be unsuitable. Unsuitable meant several things. Already pregnant. Not a virgin, physically unable to produce children. But how would anyone know? The law anticipates this. It allows for testimony from those who are present. It permits challenges based on witness accounts. It creates a system where intimate violation becomes public record. There's a case preserved in Landmobok, the Book of Settlements, describing Icelandic colonization. A man named Herjulf married a woman named Thorin. 2 months later, he sought an annulment. He claimed she was not a virgin on their wedding night. 3 men testified. They had been present in the chamber. They described her reactions, her lack of visible pain, the absence of blood. Based on their testimony, the marriage was dissolved. Thorin's bride price was returned. Her reputation was destroyed. The text doesn't question why the men were there. It treats their presence as ordinary, their testimony as legitimate. Thorin disappears from the record after that. We don't know what happened to her, but we know Herjulf remarried within the year. This pattern appears repeatedly. Women challenged, examined, judged based on their wedding night performance. Men evaluating whether they displayed the correct amount of fear, resistance, and suffering, because suffering was proof. Tears confirmed virginity. Visible distress suggested inexperience. If a bride seemed calm, too composed, too familiar with what was happening, questions arose. Some women were examined the next morning. Older married women, often the groom's female relatives, would inspect the bride. They checked for blood. They asked invasive questions. They reported their findings to the family. In some regions, the bloodied bed linens were displayed, not publicly in the modern sense, but shown to key family members and witnesses as confirmation. This practice is documented in various Norse settlements and appears in later Scandinavian folk traditions that preserve earlier customs. Your most private trauma becomes evidence. Your pain becomes proof of your value. Why would a society function this way? The answer lies in Viking social structure. Norse culture was intensely concerned with legitimacy. Inheritance, property rights, and social standing all depended on clear bloodlines. In a world without DNA testing, without hospitals, without modern record keeping, how do you prove a child is legitimate? This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was a legal technology, a system designed to prevent disputes, protect property, and maintain social order. But it was a system built on women's bodies, on their suffering, on their complete lack of agency. Viking women had more rights than their counterparts in many medieval societies. They could own property, seek divorce, and manage households, but they couldn't refuse marriage. They couldn't refuse consummation, and they couldn't refuse witnesses. Their bodies were the foundation of the entire social contract, and that contract required verification. The emotional cost is harder to document. Norse sources rarely record women's internal experiences. We have their legal status, their economic roles, their appearances in property disputes. We don't have their private thoughts, but occasionally something breaks through. Runic inscriptions from Norway and Sweden include memorial stones erected by women. Some mention marriages. The language is formulaic, but occasionally there's an edge. One stone from 11th century Sweden, raised by a woman named Gunhild for her sister, includes the phrase, "She endured what was required." Just 5 words, but they suggest an entire lifetime of compulsory suffering. Another inscription from Norway, fragmentary and worn, appears to say, "She bore what no woman should bear, yet lived." These aren't dramatic confessions, they're hints, whispers across centuries. But they tell us the women knew, they understood what was being done to them. They simply had no mechanism to stop it. The system persisted for generations. As Christianity spread through Scandinavia in the 10th and 11th centuries, some practices changed. Church, marriage, rituals replaced pagan ceremonies. Priests began performing weddings, but the underlying structure remained. Women were still property. Marriages still required verification. Consummation was still a legal necessity. The witnesses eventually stopped entering the bedchamber as Christianity formalized marriage rituals, but the assumption never disappeared. The idea that women's bodies existed to serve family interests, to produce legitimate heirs, to maintain social order simply became quieter. Medieval Scandinavian law codes from the Christian period still included provisions for annulment based on non-consummation, still allowed testimony about the wedding night, still treated women's bodies as evidence rather than their own. Here's what we need to understand about Viking Age society. It produced remarkable achievements, complex trade networks, sophisticated craftsmanship, exploratory voyages across the Atlantic, legal assemblies that influenced modern democracy. But it built all of that on a foundation of control. Control of land, control of resources, control of women. The wedding night ritual wasn't a flaw in Viking culture. It was part of how that culture functioned, part of how it maintained itself across generations. Modern scholarship has worked to recover women's experiences from this period. Archaeologists examine grave goods and settlement patterns. Linguists analyze runic inscriptions. Historians reread the sagas looking for women's voices in the margins. What emerges is a picture of resilience and suffering intertwined. Women who managed estates, who influenced political decisions, who raised children and maintained households. Women who did all of this while navigating a system that fundamentally viewed them as property. If this video revealed something you'd never learned in school, subscribe for more honest explorations of medieval history. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next investigation.